and I'm incredibly grateful. So I'll start with the words from the Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals. Start in English. May the All-Merciful send us Elijah the prophet. May he be remembered for good, who shall bring us good news, salvation, and consolation. If you know it, join in and sing with me. Harachamanu yishachanu et Eliyahu anavi zachor latov. Harachamanu yishachanu et Eliyahu anavi zachor latov. Vivaseh lanu lanu, vivaseh lanu lanu, vivaseh lanu besorot tovot, Yeshua benechamot. Yerai dai 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 dai, yerai dai 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 dai, yerai dai 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 dai. Beep, beep, the unmistakable chorus of cell phones, beeping gently but insistently, vibrating against the bookcase, buzzing on the sofa armrest. I was enjoying Shabbat dinner with my uncle and aunt at their apartment in Jerusalem. 20 of us, them, their children, their grandchildren, and a couple of significant others, I guess one of whom is married now. When the buzzing started, my cousins stood up and grabbed their phones from wherever they were. The Pikud HaOref, Israel's home front command, was sounding Tseva Adom, red alert, code red. A missile had been launched towards Israel. The first alert tells everyone in the country, prepare for the second alert. If it's coming for you, it's coming. I looked around the dining room. People were kind of moving, but not panicking. And I wasn't sure exactly how I was supposed to react. And I felt like one of those toddlers who falls and skins their knee and is about to decide whether or not to cry and is looking up at the other adults like, are they gonna do something? What's the look on their face? My cousin Neely was at the sink washing some dishes, and she finished up with the dish that was in her hand. My uncle, Bob, or as we call him, Dode Bob, who struggles to walk, was doing his best to get to the front door. His son's lifting up his walker, helping him along. They don't have a safe room to go in. But his son, my cousin Ilan, actually lives down the block, and he has one in front of his apartment. During the Iran war in June, my aunt and uncle actually slept on cots on the floor of the kitchen because they wanted to be right by the front door so they could get there before a ballistic missile hit. And then, sure enough, the second alarm did come for us. First, the city sirens started howling from the street. I never heard something quite so loud. It was right in the window. The phones lit up. The French Hill neighborhood of Jerusalem was ordered into bomb shelters. And then we all moved. My cousins realized quickly that there wasn't enough time to get my uncle up the block to the safe room. So they quickly pivoted and took him to a shelter, a public shelter, across the street in the basement of a building. It wasn't ideal. It was only one light. The stairs were cluttered with stuff. Cockroaches roamed the floor. And sure enough, when we got there, one of my youngest cousins vomited all over from the stress. When I got back to the U.S., a student who had recently returned from Israel reached out to me. Her program had taken her to the south of Israel to hear from Israeli communities that were impacted by October 7th. She was shaken by the experience. But then her bus, she told me, drove by Gaza. They could hear the pounding, the explosions, the bombs in the distance. They could see destroyed villages with leveled buildings. And no one said anything. Not a word about the Gazans. Not a word about their lives. Their suffering untold. Their story was missing. She said that she felt alone, silenced, unable to share what she was feeling. And it seemed to her that only one suffering could be named. Only one narrative could be shared. Before I went to Israel this summer, I received a phone call. Hi, Rabbi Lerner. I need to speak with you. Sure. What's going on? Well, I'm very upset. I'm so sorry. What's wrong? You seem to spend a great deal of time on progressive causes when you should be making Israel the... Did I totally mess this up? It's hard to remember all the phone calls. No, I'm good. Where was I? Yes. When you should be making Israel advocacy the center of your rabbinate. Hamas is still in charge, and Israel faces a life or death situation. Her very existence is at stake. Okay, I'm listening. And some of your criticisms of the Israeli government have made me extremely uncomfortable. Any critique emboldens Israel's enemies and promotes our current epidemic of anti-Semitism. We must be unwavering in our support for Israel at this time. I understand. And if this is not addressed, I'm considering leaving the shul. I'm so sorry to hear that. But I'm glad that you're able to share all this with me. The very same week, a couple days later, another phone call. Hi, Rabbi Lerner. I need to speak with you. Sure. What's going on? Well, I'm very upset. So sorry. What's wrong? I appreciate your support for Israel after October 7th and your advocacy on behalf of the hostages. Still, you've not spoken out enough against the famine in Gaza, and you should be protesting the violence perpetrated on civilians in the West Bank more strongly. Okay, I hear you. The lack of support for the people of Gaza is devastating, and because of my Jewish faith, I find it morally indefensible. I understand. And if this is not addressed, I'm considering leaving the shul. I'm so sorry to hear that. But I'm glad that you're able to share all this with me. Friends, these are shortened versions of real conversations. I've received calls and texts and emails from people across the political spectrum over the last several months. And as the situation continues to deteriorate, these communications grow more frequent, more intense, and more emotional. I always appreciate the opportunity for connection, to hear where members of our community are coming from. I've worried a bit. Can I hold my arms and my heart and have the capacity to extend, to embrace, and to hold everyone? Members of our shul have children and grandchildren living in Israel, in and out of bomb shelters, serving in the Israeli army. I can only imagine their fear. I too am afraid for my cousins. But I also force myself to look at the pictures and the news coming out of Gaza, the humanitarian crisis in starvation, and I feel sick to my stomach. There have been many tragedies that I've learned of. One, the murder of a Palestinian peace activist, Auda Hathaway, by a Jewish terrorist settler in the West Bank. People in our community actually had met Auda and spoke about what a wonderful person she was. Even the most fervent supporters of Israel with whom I've spoken know that this is 100% wrong, that there's no defense for all the settler violence at all, and it tears at the very moral fabric of Israel itself. I cannot tell you how many passionate Zionists in our community and beyond have written, have called, have reached out in pain. Here's a couple of excerpts of their emails. They ask, how can we keep supporting Israel? How can we still support this war with all the suffering it causes, no matter how complicated it is? Or another one, I initially supported the war in response to the October 7th horror, but how can we support the war now? Israel must come up with a plan and a diplomatic solution. And again, I've heard the same words. There comes a point where enough is enough. My friends, many of us have been struggling to hold on to both sides of this conflict. On one side is our family. The bonds of family are like nothing else. And then on the other side, which is complicated since it includes a murderous, terrorist, authoritarian regime, but on that other side are also innocent people and children. The current situation is and can be deeply personal and has the potential to tear our community apart. I've spoken with young Jews in college or graduate school in their early 20s who want not only nothing to do with Israel, but who are beginning to turn away from Judaism itself. They see religious Zionist Jews burning Palestinian villages and olive groves. And they ask me, is this Judaism? They see the lack of police or military response to what's going on in the West Bank. Is this Judaism? My friends, our tradition is being co-opted. It is being taken over by extremists and moving to a kind of position that, at least for me, I want nothing to do with. Even Orthodox rabbis, whose communities are really at the core of this, they're starting to sound the alarm. Just last month, Rabbi Yosef Blau, a senior spiritual leader at Yeshiva University, the Center of Orthodox Judaism in New York, wrote an open letter titled "A Call for Moral Clarity," which about 80 other brave Orthodox rabbis signed on to. In this letter, they condemned the settler extremist violence in the West Bank and the growing hardening of attitudes towards all Palestinians. They also criticized Israel's government for allowing starvation in Gaza, and they rejected what they called the false notion that human suffering will somehow lead to surrender. Most importantly, they reminded us of our deepest Jewish values of justice, of compassion, of moral responsibility. And they called on their community, the Orthodox community, especially religious Zionists, the government, and the entire settler movement to live up to those ideals of justice and compassion, especially at this moment. Now, as a rabbi, I struggle with all this. The different phone calls, the different pain. What exactly is my role? What should I say? What's our role as a diverse community? What can we do? How can we move forward? We care deeply for Israelis, yet we hold a wide range of perspectives. And just as Israel is growing more and more divided, those divides often appear among us. And so what is our responsibility as part of the larger Jewish family? How do we do this? How do we support Israel while also criticizing and calling out behavior that is utterly unacceptable? And how do we do it as a shul? This morning, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we read earlier the story of Hagar and Ishmael, cast out of Abraham's home. Mother and son wander in the desert. When the water runs out, Ishmael is faint with thirst. Hagar cannot bear to watch her son, her child, die. And so she places him under a bush in the shade, and she withdraws, weeping. And then the Torah says that God heard the voice of the boy, Ba'asher Husham, where he was. At that moment, Hagar's eyes opened. She was able to see beyond her despair, and she sees a well of water which saves them. Rashi, commenting on those words, Ba'asher Husham, explains that God judged Ishmael according to his present state. Although his descendants, Rashi says, Arabs, would one day afflict Israel. It's interesting that Rashi is writing this 1,000 years ago. Rashi says, in this moment in the Torah's narrative, Ishmael was suffering, and Ishmael was crying out, and God responds to the pain of a child, not to some shadow of future history. This, of course, teaches us to see others in their humanity now, not through the lens of what they might become. The rabbis then extend this lesson. Even when we feel wronged or when we are fearful, the primary emotion that's driving so many conflicts in the world, even in those moments, we are commanded to notice suffering wherever it appears. God heard Ishmael's cry, and then he and his mother are saved. Sometimes, like Hagar, we need to open up our own eyes. We need to see the humanity and the needs of the other. Ishmael, as I said, is later understood to be the forefather of all the Arab peoples. And medieval commentators, including Ramban, Nachmanides, and Radak, in the centuries later, note that he too, Ishmael, is blessed as a child of Abraham, a child of Abraham, worthy of dignity. Some Jewish texts emphasize that our treatment of Ishmael's descendants must be marked by compassion and justice. And so today on Rosh Hashanah, we plead to God to hear our voices. We are reminded that God hears the cry of every suffering child. To walk in God's ways is to hear pain, is to open our hearts to pain. Doesn't matter if it's Jewish or not Jewish. Just as God responded to Ishmael, Basher Husham, where he was, we too are called to respond to those around us as they are in their moments of need. Now, what's really wondrous is that through all of our people's suffering, thousands and thousands of years, the arc of our history, the long arc that the Jewish people have suffered, we have continued to heed this charge, this rabbinic charge, to be compassionate. And we've woven that value into the very moral fabric of Judaism. The rabbis tell us that after the Israelites crossed the Sea of Reeds, they sang with joy as the Egyptians drowned. And God rebukes them. God stops them. My children are perishing, and you sing before me? Even in victory, we are taught, we do not rejoice over the suffering of others. Now, that same spirit, that same approach appeared even in our darkest chapter of our history. Even in the Shoah, even in the Holocaust, there were Jews who held the suffering of others alongside of their own. Emanuel Ringelblum, a Polish Jewish historian and social worker, created this amazing archive, the Oneg Shabbos, in the middle of the Warsaw Ghetto. He wanted to preserve the truth of what was happening to Jews under Nazi occupation. But he went further. He recorded not only the Jewish agony, but he also mentions the plight of the Poles under the same regime. In one moving passage, he wrote, quote, "The Polish population too is being bled white. The Germans starve them and exploit them mercilessly, though of course not as they do to us, the Jews." Even from within the hell of the Warsaw Ghetto, Ringelblum lived that ancient teaching from the sea. He could still see the pain of others, even those who had often made Jews suffer, which the Poles did. He recognized their hunger, their degradation, their trauma, without denying his own people's catastrophe. It's simply an extraordinary passage. In the darkest hour of our people's history, he bore witness not only for our people, but also for the dignity and suffering of others. So I ask you, and I challenge myself, let's open our hearts to Jews, to Muslims, to every human being who suffers. How do we begin? First, look inward. Today on Rosh Hashanah, we are given this powerful metaphor of standing, of approaching the Melech Malchei HaMelachim, the King of Kings, the ruler of rulers. the one who sees into our very souls, not just the side of ourselves that we like to show others, but God sees the shadows we hide. And so ask yourself, where have our hearts grown hard? Where have we refused to see the pain of another? That first step is simply to face it, to admit it, to let our own walls crack open just a little bit. Once we do that, there can be an opening. Second, after we look inside, look around. We must learn to speak to each other and to listen. Not by email, not by sending articles, not by those approaches. Those harden hearts more than they do anything else. We must learn to sit together. We must listen even when it's hard, even when it angers us. 10 years ago at Amuna, here we started Israel Conversations to try to talk together. And back then, it was pretty challenging. But now, after 2 years of this war, I think it's much, much harder. But our community is too precious. We're not one voice, we're many voices. And that's a gift. A challenging one for sure, but a gift nonetheless. Together, I believe that we can hold that nuance. Together, we can hold more than one suffering at a time. That's why I hope you'll be working with Essential Partners, an organization that helps communities have and hold space and hold room for hard conversations across deep divides, teaching us to speak honestly, to listen generously, and to stay connected even when we disagree, to help us speak, to help us listen. And we will need you, all of you, left, right, center. Because if we can learn this here in this community, it will change not only how we talk about Israel, it will change us, it will change how we treat each other with truer respect, with greater kindness. We can show the world what is possible. And third, we must hear those voices of suffering. Not those that divide us, not those that dehumanize, but those that actually can open our heart. We will continue, as we've done, to hear from Israeli Jews who survived October 7th, and from Israeli Jews from different perspectives. We will hear from Palestinian Israelis, and hopefully from Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza, who carry their own wounds. Voices that we have not yet heard here. And we'll turn to their art, to their music, to their stories, because sometimes we need a song to feel what words cannot say. And we will welcome in an amazing organization, the Parents Circle. Our Israel trips have met with them several times. They bring an Israeli parent who lost a child, and they bring a Palestinian parent who lost a child to this conflict. And both parents who've lost children to this terrible, terrible time speak their truth side by side. They don't preach, they don't prescribe, they simply tell their stories. Every time I hear them, I have to say, I'm just sitting there crying. We have to have the courage to listen, the courage to see, the courage to act with mercy. In Rosh Hashanah, we are called to change ourselves, and through that, to help change the world, to turn towards peace, toward ending the conflict, towards ending the suffering, towards bringing our hostages home. So this year, I'll invite you to do this with me, to notice your feelings, to join us in conversation, to learn from us, with each other, and across our differences. Let us create stronger connections between ourselves, learning each other's stories. Where are we coming from? Now, some of you may feel that this is not the place for you. But please hear me very clearly when I say that I believe that a community made up of diverse identities, priorities, and perspectives makes us stronger and healthier. Not only are you welcome, but you are an essential part of the fabric of our Emunah home. And I pray that this model of dialogue and connection that we build, that this can be a model that is then brought outside our synagogue walls, into our homes, our various communities, and beyond, to create stronger bonds of connection between us all. Another harachaman that I'll just say, harachaman v'yitain shalom bein b'nei Yitzchak u'bein b'nei Yishmael. May the All-Merciful bring peace between the children of Isaac and the children of Yishmael. That work begins with us, in our hearts, in our community, in this new year. Shana Tova U'Shnat Shalom. May it be a year of deep listening, compassion, and peace. Let us say Amen.